I'm all for students facing consequences. I do not want to say that they don't face consequences in my classroom, but I was very aware that behavior is a symptom, not the problem. And so if the symptom is the student has used AI, what was the problem that led to that symptom? What is the root of this?
Hello there, and welcome to today's episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast. My name is Monica Burns, and I am so glad that you're here to join me today. If you want to make the most of education technology, aka EdTech, well, you are in the right place. My goal has always been to help make EdTech easier and give you ideas you can try yourself, share with a colleague, or bookmark for later in the school year. Every Tuesday here on the Easy EdTech Podcast, you'll hear stories from my time in the classroom, the work I do now with schools and districts, and my travels to different EdTech events. Get ready for solo episodes where I share some quick tips and stories, and interviews full of practical ideas and stories from new guests each month. If we mention something you'd like to check out, make sure to click the link. You'll find it in the episode description or the summary area where you're listening to this podcast, or you can find every episode and all of the resources we mention by going to classtechtips.com/podcast, or by going to classtechtips.com and just clicking on the Easy EdTech Podcast button at the top of the page. This episode is sponsored by my Easy EdTech Club, a membership designed to help K-12 educators save time and simplify technology integration. When you join, you'll get instant access to dozens of months' worth of content from the past couple of years, plus new masterclasses, guides, and resources each month. It's all self-paced, so you can dive in whenever it works for your schedule. Head to easyedtechclub.com to learn more and sign up. That's easyedtechclub.com for all the details. This week's episode is titled How to Respond When Students Use AI with Jen Roberts. I came across one of Jen's recent blog posts on Edutopia about the topic of student AI use, a question I get all the time when working with teachers or hosting a webinar or workshop. As you'll hear in today's conversation, I love how Jen discusses the differences between being proactive and reactive when discussing this topic with students, and the role curiosity plays when talking to colleagues about tackling these challenges too. So let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to chat with you today about teaching in this age of AI. But before we get into all of that, Jen, can you share with listeners a little bit about your role in education? What does your day-to-day look like?
So I'm a classroom teacher. I've been a classroom teacher for 29 years now. I'm about to head into year 30. It's very exciting. And I teach English to 9th graders and 12th graders. I've been in a high school space for the last 18 years. So my day-to-day is, 4 or 5 periods of English, depending on the year. And that's where I live. It is in the room with the children, who are more or less still children in the most part, and teaching them to read and write and be more literate and, happier, healthier human beings.
And for us today, right, that kind of high school area in particular, and it's not just high school where I'm hearing this from educators, and I'm sure you're hearing it from folks in all different age ranges too, but we're talking today about teaching in supporting students in this age of AI and this idea, when students use AI in ways they shouldn't, and coming with that, with that coming from your Edutopia article. So could you take us back to the moment that inspired this article or series of articles? Did something happen in your classroom? Was there a moment that made you want to write about this topic?
So I think what motivated me to want to write about this topic is I noticed that I was having conversations with kids about AI that felt different than the way I heard from my colleagues that they were having conversations about AI. And I don't just mean my local colleagues. I mean, when I would go to visit other schools and things like that as well, that it seemed to me that my approach was different and that I felt more curious about it. I wanted to survey my students about, are you using AI and how are you using AI and what is it doing for you? And I was doing those kinds of surveys and that kind of data collection. But what I was hearing from my colleagues was more along the lines of, the punitive, how they did it, they got a zero, that kind of thing. And I'm all for students facing consequences. I do not want to say that they don't face consequences in my classroom, but I was very aware that behavior is a symptom, not the problem. And so if the symptom is the student has used AI, what was the problem that led to that symptom? What is the root of this? And I know that some of the root of it is just the teenage brain. Right? Yeah. We're dealing with the chemistry of teenagers who are risk takers. They are going to jump off the roof into a swimming pool and they are going to turn in work that they didn't do. And plagiarism and students trying to cheat their way through school is not in any way a new thing. That did not suddenly pop into the existence in November of 22 when ChatGPT dropped, right? So always my approach to plagiarism was also proactive too. So then when AI became the replacement from, instead of I copied from my friend, it was I copied from AI. Now I still want to know why. I still want to know what got you there. How did you arrive at that decision? So yes, I've many times had the moment of reading student work and saying, wow, you did not write this. Yeah. Let's find out what happened. And sometimes that goes all the way back to 15, 16 years ago when I knew they didn't write this, right? Yeah. So that aha moment of going, oh, not your work is not new. If anything, AI for me has made that moment easier to spot. Yeah. I see it quicker. When they copy from another student, it's still another student's work. Right. So it's a little harder to validate, right? So yeah, it was about, maybe I can show my colleagues globally, nationally, wherever, through Edutopia, I have a little more reach and I can say, let's be curious. Let's not see this as a moral failing. Let's see this as a systematic failing. And let's look at what happened in the process that led this student to make this decision.
Yeah. And just that idea of framing this around curiosity, having us be a part of that process when we're having conversations with someone who might understandably, right, have the temptation, just like the other examples you gave, to do something that we would hope they might not do, but can understand why they would take that risk or take that leap, right, into trying something because they're, curious about this too. And, is there, or what language or strategies do you find most effective in opening up these honest conversations with students about those choices? You talked about being proactive, right? What might that look like in a classroom environment?
It usually just looks like a curious question, like, tell me what happened here, and I know they used AI, but I don't ever really lead with that. I usually kind of start with, tell me what happened here. And the student, from there, the conversation can go a variety of different ways. And I should preface this by saying, we are talking about the reactive conversation that happens after a student has used AI. There's a whole other podcast about the proactive conversations and the proactive strategies we use way before the student ever gets a writing assignment, way before they ever even think about this. But since we're in the reactive side looks to me a lot like curiosity. And as soon as I say, tell me what happened here, the vast majority of my students will just cop to it. They'll just be like, I use ChatGPT. And partly that's because I have relationships with them already. And I don't tell them specifically, I'm not going to judge you as a human because you used AI, but I think they get that I'm not going to judge them as a human. You're still a good person, right? And you made a mistake. So let's talk through what that means. And with those students who admit to it right away, I get a lot of really useful information. I get information about what's going on in their lives. I get information about where they didn't understand the assignments. I get information about what the hard part was for them. And often the hard part was 2 weeks ago. The hard part was, I was absent for 3 days when we read that text, and so I didn't feel ready to write about it. There was a moment or a gap in their instruction that I missed.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not blaming myself for their bad choices, but there was a place I could have intervened sooner and didn't. And so when I learn in these conversations, like, where was the intervention point that I could have made a difference in your decision? Now I can see those intervention points sooner for other children.
Yeah.
Right? I can notice sooner that, oh, wait, you're not making progress on your draft. I need to talk to you sooner before you result to making a bad choice. So the trick for me is not having the reactive conversation, actually. It's about getting there before then. And then when I do have to have that reactive conversation, how much can I learn? Not just about this kid in this situation, but what can I learn about this student from this student that will help me help other students? Yeah. So, and how can I also make sure that this conversation builds my relationship with the student instead of tears it down, so that when they are faced with a similar academic challenge in the future, they handle it better? What skills can I give them? What tools can I give them? Okay, the next time you find yourself up against a deadline, what are your options, right? Okay, the next time you find that you don't know enough about the material to finish this work, what are your options? Because for my seniors, they're headed into college. They need to know how to handle those situations without me. And for my freshmen, they've got 4 more years of high school, and they didn't need to know how to handle those situations without me.
Mm-hmm. And just that, the fact finding that's taking place in those conversations, I think for someone who's listening who might feel almost powerless, right, with some of these tools that are out there, that's such an empowering way to frame it, right? That not only can I have a tough conversation with a student and kind of do all the things that I might feel like must happen, right, in those moments, but there's something that is actionable from that too, right? It's a learning that's going to go into the next conversation with the same student, a different conversation with a different student, and just the general way you might address something in a new unit that has nothing to do with AI, but now you just have more information to work with. So, that reactive piece, I think, is where so many people are right now when they read over a piece of student work and say, I don't think they've ever used the word delve in a conversation with me, or another word that ChatGPT seems to love for some reason. So for someone who is, or who maybe has had a bunch of these reactive moments, how would you suggest teachers address AI use proactively? Maybe it's not the beginning of the school year. Maybe it is. Maybe it's simply before a major assignment or something where they anticipate, right, this might be an issue.
Mm-hmm. I think one of my proactive advantages, and I do not in any way want to say that I have any kind of magic bullet here, because I had a 9th grader turn in AI work last week. It's not, there's nothing about this that's magical, but I want to mitigate and I want to reduce. So I want to bring down the number of those conversations I have to have. So my big thing up front is I let students know that I know about AI. I use it in front of them. I talk to them about it. I say, the HTML on this Canvas page was really kind of confusing and hard to read. So I gave it to ChatGPT and I said, can you make it better? And it did. Look how much it made this better for you. Or, so I am upfront with students about my own AI use, not because I want to advocate for it necessarily. And there are moments in the class when we get curious about something, or we try and see, like, hey, could AI write an outline for this essay? Let's see. And we do it together and I pull it up on the big screen. And by using it actively in front of them and discussing my own uses of it, I'm subtly letting them know, hey, I'm in on this. Because the first time I said ChatGPT to my 9th graders in the spring of 23, they all started looking at each other.
How does she know?
She knows about that? I thought that was just a TikTok thing.
Right.
Wait, grown-ups know about it? So, students are more likely to try and pass off AI writing to an adult that they think won't recognize it. So by showing them that AI is a regular part of my workflow, I'm showing them that I know what this is. I can recognize this. And then there's the piece that just goes on every Google Doc my students write that says something along the lines of, do all your writing for this assignment in this Google Doc. I want to be able to see your version history. And the way I preface that to them is 2 things. Number 1, I want to make sure you really wrote this.
Yeah.
But I also want my high achieving students are genuinely and legitimately concerned about having their writing flagged as AI, even when it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And I want them to know that if they do all their work in a Google Doc, even if they're eventually going to turn in a PDF, even if they're eventually going to turn in just, copy and pasted words into Canvas, if they do all their writing in a Google Doc first, they will always be able to prove what their process was.
Yeah.
And so in college, to academic deans, to professors, to other teachers, like, look, here's when I worked on this. This is what I did. Here's how it evolved. So everything happens in a Google Doc. Every Google Doc gets a statement at the top says, doing all your work in this Google Doc. If you copy and paste large chunks from other places, that will be suspect, and we will have to have a conversation. And then I show them how easy it is to spot AI writing.
Yeah.
I do an activity with my 9th graders where I give them 3 paragraphs and we play with scoring. Like, how would you score these paragraphs? Mm-hmm. And they spend about 10 minutes reading them and writing numbers next to them and like, how would they score them? And then when they're done doing that, they're like, did we get the numbers right? Did we score them right? And I said, actually, I just want you to tell me which one is AI. And they go, oh, I said, I'll give you a few minutes to read them again. They don't need a few minutes. In 10 seconds, every single group has pointed to the AI paragraph, but they weren't looking for that up front. They were looking to score them, so they didn't see it. And when I flip it on them and say, find it, and they go, I'll point to it. And I go, wow, you guys are brilliant. You found the AI right away. And they're so proud of themselves. I'm like, if you can tell, I can tell.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then they go, oh, I get, that's why she made us do this, right? So, you just show them it's easy to spot. I make sure they see it fail. I make sure they see it be inadequate. Like, if you're relying on this for a good grade, it's not going to work for you because it's going to fail. I make sure they see that I use it a lot. Those are my tricks, right? Like letting them all know that. And then, maybe not and then. Maybe and then is an answer to another one of your questions.
Well, I think right there's just so many gems for someone who's wondering what transparency looks like in their classroom, what it means to introduce without introducing, right? These different use cases to foster some sense of community, right, around what AI use may feel great, right, for getting a recipe idea, but might not be as appropriate for work that we're submitting, right, and claiming to be our own. So I think kids need those examples, like you are providing these experiences for them.
And I also give them the opportunity to use student-facing tools, Brisk Boost, Magic Student, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
The COPA and FERPA compliant tools that they can actually touch. One of my seniors who used AI for some writing, we'd already talked about it. We'd already had the reactive conversation. And he called me over to his desk a few days later, and he pointed to the assignment that I had flagged as AI on his, but he was looking at the Canvas page. And he said, Ms. Roberts, you won't let me use AI for my assignments, but how come you get to use AI and we don't get to use AI? And I looked over at the page he happened to have on his screen for that assignment, and I pointed to the link to Magic School that said AI feedback. And I said, I do want you to use AI. Yeah. I gave you a link to get feedback that would help you with your paper. And instead of even reading what was on the screen of your own assignment, you just turned in AI work. And the other students looked at him and just said, I think she's got you, bro.
Right. Yeah.
And so giving them legitimate ways to use it that will actually help them, but still be within that line of academic honesty.
And it's interesting too, because, and I'm sure you've had these conversations with other educators also who are kind of wrapping their head around what does it mean to introduce these AI literacy skills in the context of a curriculum, right? And the examples that you've given are ones where I think people may have some light bulb moments to say like, oh, I could like put this into this unit here, or this would be a way, right, to have a conversation alongside the primary source documents we're about to look at, together, or whatever it might be. And, whether it's managing resources and student work inside a learning management system, or just having these conversations, how has this emergence of AI shifted and changed just your classroom management strategies, if at all? Or, are there things that you've seen or heard from other educators who are trying to grasp what this might mean for them in terms of big changes?
For me, it's been pretty subtle. I've had one-to-one laptops in my classroom since 2008. I'm not one of those people who's like, we're going to go back to writing everything on paper.
Yeah.
That's not my vibe. So, and like I said, AI is just a different form of plagiarism, and plagiarism has always been an issue. So it's just a slightly different issue. So I wouldn't say that it's dramatically impacted my classroom management style. It has increased the amount of collaborative activities I do with my students, which I think is a good thing. Like I needed to do more of that anyway. So I've done more collaborative writing. I was doing collaborative writing beforehand anyway, but the aha moment was, oh, when they're writing with a partner, neither one of them wants to get busted for using AI inappropriately, right? So they kind of hold each other accountable to that. And then I only have half as many to grade. Also, as someone who co-wrote a book with another human, I know that writing with another person actually really helps you think through your ideas, and you have to negotiate things, and you have to rehearse everything verbally with each other to get it down and have it come out the way you want it. So I'm a big fan of collaborative writing. I think the students think that that's them getting away with something. And I think it's actually a harder, more challenging, and more interesting cognitive task.
Yeah.
And the turn-in rate is higher, right? Like you might normally have a 10 or 15% number of kids who just don't bother to turn in that assignment. But when they have a partner that they're doing it with, they're more likely to turn it in too.
Oh yeah, right. You've got that accountability partner right beside you who is there as well. And you've shared so many strategies, Jen, for educators who may feel a bit overwhelmed or not sure where to start or what these conversations might look like. But are there shifts that you think we need to make as educators in education more broadly to support students in using AI responsibly and ethically? And by shifts, I guess, I really mean this, more strategic or more systemic ways of having these conversations, yes, inside of a classroom, but also more broadly.
I think there's a lot of shifts that need to happen in education, but not just because of AI. Let's not lay that all on AI's doorstep. I think there's so much, and probably way too much, focus on grades in our system. Grades, GPAs. Oh, I'm taking the AP class because I want the weighted grade. Oh, my parents are this or that about my grades. Or, there's so much emphasis on the letter attached to your name, and so much less emphasis on what skills do I have, and what can I produce, and what can I deliver, and how can I work with a group, and those kinds of things. And so I think, and I have no idea how to do this, by the way, I think there needs to be a massive shift in education away from classification and stratification and ranking of kids with our grading system, and way more of a focus onto how can I learn and develop and grow as a human being. And that, unfortunately, I don't see happening anytime soon. But if AI does anything for us, and I love to think about the long term of what will this look like in 5 years or 10 years?
Right, yeah.
I think it may cause us to realize that we need to humanize learning even more. And that's, as someone who's usually generally pro AI, and I'm also pro human.
Yeah.
If AI can do these things, well, what can humans do, and what do humans need to do by themselves and with their own brains before they engage with their AI assistant?
Yeah.
What do you need to show me that you can do before I say, okay, now you can go talk to the robot? I think it's going to be a slow and painful process of change, because it is absolutely a game changer, and it is going to impact the way education develops over the next 10, 15 years in some scary ways.
Yeah. And just, sometimes it is, and sometimes I like, sometimes I don't like the term disruptive technology, right? But in this case, right, this might be AI might be the disruption, right? If it is pushing some of these conversations right into places on more human-centered experiences. So, in say next summer, right, we're having this conversation, or 2 summers from now, right, we're talking about AI in education. Do you think plagiarism, do you think student use as writers, do you think that will be something we're talking about still? Or do you think there will be a bit of a shift in the next year or two?
Well, here in heading into the summer of 2025, we're talking about student writing and plagiarism. In the summer of 2023, I was talking about student writing and plagiarisms, right? So like that conversation hasn't shifted much over the last couple of years. I think we'll still be talking about student writing and plagiarism because I think that education is a very traditional space where things change very slowly. And there will be probably a decade or more of adjustment before we really figure out the lines between what students can do with AI and what they can't do with AI and what they have to do themselves. And those lines will all be different in every single classroom for every single teacher.
Yeah.
And so those conversations will still be happening around, well, I let students do this. Well, I don't let students do that, right? Like, there are places where spell check is still not allowed, right? That's a thing, so that old saying about, the future's already here, it's just unevenly distributed. The past is still here, and it is also unevenly distributed. And so we are in all those places simultaneously. And so I think those conversations will just continue to evolve. Of course, the AI will grow exponentially more effective at what it does. But I still meet teachers every day who don't know what a paraphraser is and don't realize that students are running their work through ChatGPT and then running it through a paraphraser to make it sound more human. A teacher came to me, I think it was an essay about, it was an essay where one of the authors' names, her last name was Bishop, and the student was writing about Bishop's argument. And the humanizer had changed it to Pope.
No way. Yeah.
And the teacher came to me and said, why is the student think that this author's name is Pope? And I said, because your student ran that through ChatGPT and then ran it through a humanizer that changed synonyms, and the last name Bishop became Pope. And she went, that's a thing? Yeah, that's a thing. And so, Big Brother becomes Giant Sibling in their essay about 1984. And I have that one I haven't seen personally. That one's from the internet. But those things are going to happen. And if teachers don't know how to recognize that when it comes across their plate, they're going to continue to be sort of baffled.
Oh, absolutely. And I think those examples are great ones to finish up on today because it paints such a picture, right, of both the challenges within this space, where we might be in the future, but then, of course, like you said, anchored in some of the traditional struggles that educators have as they work to support all of their students. And, Jen, I will link out for anyone listening to the blog, to follow you on Blue Sky, to find your book, to find your Edutopia articles. But for someone who's on the go, maybe not pressing buttons on their podcast player as they listen and wants to make a mental note, where can they follow you? Where can they learn more about your work?
So the best place to find me and my work is through my blog, which is litandtech.com, LITANDTECH, right? So think literacy and technology together, right? Litandtech.com. And on there, you will find links to the things I've written for Edutopia. You'll find links to my book. So it's sort of like a one-stop shop for all the other stuff. And there's also articles on my blog about some of the things I talked about today, like that strategy for giving ninth graders 3 paragraphs and asking them to figure out which one was AI. That is described in a blog post I have as well. So if you want more information about any of that, those things that I've talked about, a lot of it is already on my blog.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time today and sharing all these great strategies with listeners.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to be here.
It was lots of fun chatting with Jen today, and appreciate all of her insight, expertise, and actionable strategies that she shared. So let's make this EdTech easy with a few key points from this episode. Curiosity, not punishment, guides AI conversations. Version history in Google Docs can build accountability. Collaborative writing reduces AI misuse. Model real-life AI use with transparency. Remember, you can find the show notes and full list of resources from this episode, including all of the ways to connect with Jen Roberts and learn about her work by heading to easyedtechpodcast.com and finding today's episode. This episode is sponsored by my Easy EdTech Club, a membership designed to help K-12 educators save time and simplify technology integration. When you join, you'll get instant access to dozens of months worth of content from the past couple of years, plus new masterclasses, guides, and resources each month. It's all self-paced, so you can dive in whenever it works for your schedule. Head to easyedtechclub.com to learn more and sign up. That's easyedtechclub.com for all the details. Thank you for listening to this new episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast. I love creating new episodes for you each week, but I could use a bit of help spreading the word about the podcast. Can you leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app? Spotify will let you tap on the stars, and Apple Podcasts will let you tap on the stars and leave a 1 or 2 sentence review. Thank you so much for taking this extra step. It helps other educators find episodes like this one when they're searching for EdTech tips.